Hey everyone, we made it to Friday again. That means it's time for another episode of TheLeaf podcast. First of all, I hope you had a good Halloween, and I hope you enjoyed that compilation video. My PC got really mad at me for rendering a 3-hour video, so I hope you did enjoy it. And if you're wondering why I sound a little bit congested, I have no idea why. My sinuses hate me apparently, and here we are anyways. So the first thing I want to ask is, how was everyone's Halloween? Let me know down below. So, if this is your first time listening to an episode of the podcast, it's a little different than the other videos that I post. This one is more about news stories that are creepy, weird things I find online, and I usually post the link to the articles in the description of the video. This is more conversational and more me talking. So first off, I have no idea who this guy is. I did no research into it or anything. I didn't figure that was important. But apparently there is a candidate in the US named Chandler Stewart Haraba. He's running for a seat in the Idaho State of Representatives, and he has Bigfoot on his platform. He wants to do such things as making Sasquatch or Bigfoot the state animal of Idaho, and even issue hunting licenses, and even have a Bigfoot hunting season. Now, he also said that he wants to make Idaho the #1 state for Bigfoot tourism. And apparently, nobody else has any comments on this part of his platform. They're all like, yeah, okay bro, you do you. Now again, I know nothing about this guy, but I have to wonder if he's ever been on like an expedition or squatching as they call it nowadays. I also have to wonder how Bigfoot is going to feel about having tourists out in the woods searching for him, or like taking selfies with his kids or something. You have to wonder if Bigfoot's going to make a post on like Twitter or Facebook with just a picture of a bunch of people out in the woods, just tourists, ... But yeah, I thought that was a little funny because usually you don't hear anybody in any high up position mention Bigfoot, and when they do, it's kind of like a half smile, kind of talking out of the side of their mouth about it kind of thing. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting that any kind of political candidate would ever mention Bigfoot or want to give it a Bigfoot hunting license. And now, no video or podcast of mine would be complete without me bringing up some alien stuff. So this kind of tells you how behind I am with all this. I don't usually research the stuff in any depth. I just find cool stories and go from there. So there was a Global Disclosure Day. It was an event that was put on by the New Paradigm Institute, a former colonel, Carl E. Nell, a guy who worked on Project Convergence, and he was also part of the UAP task force. Now he claims that non-human intelligences exist and have interacted with humanity on this planet, and this is nothing new. He then also goes on to say that activity around nuclear sites and military sites is absolutely real and is not of any human origin. Now, when asked for proof about this, he said he has his personal guarantee, and he said that the way to bring this stuff to light is to mobilize grassroots. Political activism is the key to re-establishing proper oversight, developing a responsible disclosure process, and moving forward as a society through this effort. So now I have to ask what you think about that. Do you think that there is activity around military sites and nuclear sites? We do know that there are a lot of strange things that happen, but do you think they're alien, or do you think that it's something else? There was a comment on the last podcast, I think it was, where someone said that a lot of ufologists have taken to saying that a lot of the activity that is regarded as alien is actually demonic in nature. So what do you think about that? Do you think that it's all demonic? Do you think that some of it's demonic and some of it is extraterrestrial? Or do you think it's all aliens? Because there's also some investigators, I can never remember their names, I'm so bad at this, but he thinks that aliens are all good and that humans are bad. And I don't necessarily agree with that either. I think it's all a spectrum. What I do think is that if aliens were good in nature, they probably wouldn't act as covertly as they do. It would be more out in the open and less like trying to get you to go into the middle of the desert tell you you're the chosen one and then get you to strip off all your clothes so they can take you on their ship. It's just really weird. But in the same breath, there are stories of where people claim that aliens healed their conditions. Like years ago, I heard one story about a guy who had a tumor of some sort that was a very malignant tumor, and he was going to die from it. And then he had like an extraterrestrial experience, and they just removed the tumor. And then he went back to the hospital, and the tumor was gone, and he was cancer-free. So this is why I say it could be a spectrum. I don't know. I still think it's weird to just like approach humans and get them to do all that stuff, but yeah. Maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way. Maybe I'm just seeing it from a certain point of view and other people have their point of view, and that's fine. You can let me know down in the comments. But to continue on with the alien thing, there was a documentary film that's coming out, or is out. It's called Interview with the Extraterrestrial. Apparently in this film, a medium named Daryl Anka claims to channel an alien spirit or an alien named Bashar. Now this alien claims that the human race was created by an alien species called the Anu, who decided to inject their own DNA into a hominid species, and this was several 100,000 of your years ago. And he also says that the Anu are not extraterrestrial beings in the traditional sense, but instead are humans from another parallel Earth that have come to your version of Earth and other versions of Earth and are now trying to thank us for letting them live here after their own world was destroyed. The alien spirit then goes on to say that they are going to give us information that will prevent our society and culture from going down the same destructive path as theirs. And I think that while really cool and interesting, it also kind of sounds like the plot of Spider-Man Far From Home, where Mysterio is allegedly from a different world that succumbed to whatever entities, when it turns out he was just lying and made the whole thing up. And I know a lot of times, speaking of like references to pop culture, I guess, people would like to see like an alien species and it be kind of like Futurama where we all live together and it's funny. But what we're more likely to see, I think, is more Independence Day or Alien, where they're basically here for resources and they just strip the planet and then just peace out. And while they're here, they'd be like, yeah, we created you guys and we're your gods and thanks for the gold. And then they just leave. But again, I could be way off base. I could be completely wrong about it and it's all like good. I don't know. It's just kind of how it makes me feel about it. And this is kind of what it goes back to, it being almost demonic. Because the Anu are close to the Anunnaki, and Bashar kind of sounds like something that a demon would come up with. Because in my experience, the problem with a medium, if they're real, is you don't really know what you're contacting. It's the same as like people who use a Ouija board. You never know who or what is on the other end of that. You can't see them. And even if you could, they can just like disguise themselves. And it feels similar in a way to the black-eyed kid phenomenon, where from far away they look like just regular people, but then as you get up closer to them and you talk to them, the disguise almost seems to fall apart. And then it's like you get up close to them and they have the black eyes, the monotone voice, or the high-pitched voice, and every sense in your body says this is not a person, it's pretending to be one. But again, I could be totally wrong, it could be completely different. So let me know what you think down in the comments. I've been saying that a lot this video because I know there's going to be a variety of viewpoints on it. And still on the topic of aliens, but very different, is this article that I found that I'll link in the description. It's Insectoid Aliens. And this is from way back in the 1950s. The report was originally published by a researcher named Albert S. Rosales, I think his name is. It's from 1958. It's somewhere in southern Germany. The witness claimed that as a child, he had many encounters with insectoid beings that would approach him, examine him, and even kidnap him through levitation. The witness said the figures were similar in structure to the classic little greys, but without the oversized heads. Instead, with heads of normal size and head shape from the front and resembled that of an acorn. It still had the big round eyes, like those of a cricket. In general, they were insect-like in appearance. The beings looked like they were cloned, and they came floating into the room, one behind the other, like they were under some kind of remote control. At this point, the witness was in a complete panic and unable to move from his bed. Only with great difficulty was he able to turn his head. Fear outweighed everything. Screaming was impossible. The bed was moved, literally moved out of the place, and the bed covers were pulled away. Touching, especially in the abdomen area, was painful. Consciously, he recalls floating up to the ceiling. This incident occurred several more times. His mother would find him usually bathed in sweat, and the bed would be soaked in sweat as well. The bedding would be untidy and kicked away. He always articulated the situation precisely and interpreted the features as little devils. That's figures, I guess, not features. And he knew that the humanoids didn't actually look like that. The witness stated that the figures appeared out of nowhere and floated into his bedroom as if they had materialized into his room. There was a buzzing, kind of like a ringing in the air and in his ears. He also said there was a smell of vinegar in the air. He said the creatures were about 120 centimeters tall, which is about 3'11" or 4 feet for Americans, and they were insect-like. They had graceful gray-black bodies that could apparently penetrate everything, walls, doors, etc. So I found this one really interesting because, not only is it a step away from like the regular gray stuff, it's more insectoid. And not only is it insectoid, they don't seem to have any free will of their own. They seem to be, like he said, remote controlled, acting like drones or robots just completing a process. So if that's the case, who's controlling them and for what purpose? And this is also why I say that they're probably not good if they're just doing this to people. Like in situations like this, it just seems downright evil. But I thought that was really interesting to have like insectoid drones just come into your room that can come through the wall, come through doors, that it's almost like they're kind of phasing through this reality. That could be a bit of a schizo way to put it, but it's so weird and bizarre to think about because obviously humans can't do that. It would be really weird if we could just walk through a wall. All I know is that if I could walk through a wall, I would 100% do it to scare my siblings and really no other reason. Some people would go rob a bank and all that. I'm just like, no, I'm just going to scare the hell out of my brother and sister. But, again, do you think that it's all demonic? Do you think that they are actually aliens that don't really have good intentions for us? Almost like we're an experiment, or they're trying to examine us to find out how we're different. I don't remember who. I will get better at names over time. I just started this podcast a couple weeks ago, so, hopefully you can go on the ride with me. But it was somebody who said that the reason why that they're so curious about humankind is that we have a soul. We have a divine spark about us that they don't have, or they lost. And they're trying to figure out what makes us so special. How come we have something that they don't when they're so much more advanced? But yeah, so this next thing, I didn't really know where to put this in a video, so I'm going to put it in this podcast. This was sent in to me by August Smith. And August kind of tells me about their journey and how they got to where they are now. And I thought it was really interesting, so I think I'll share it with you all now. So August, I hope I can do this justice for you. Let me get started. I had a lukewarm Christian upbringing. It didn't seem to matter until my parents got divorced. My dad started going to church every weekend. My mom started being an emotional volcano. I was torn between two worlds. I wished my mother would calm down and spend time with me, not some distraction. I would reach out for my father's strength, but I was still a child. Into my teenage years, I would cry until there were no more tears. At my mother's house, which was my primary residence, I would sneak down to the garage for respite. I would listen to Enya, which is healing Celtic music. My note here is that my mom used to love Enya, so I know all about Enya. It's cool music. So, once I made a plan to kill myself. I had a strong compound bow, and I wanted to shoot it up into the underside of my skull. Thank goodness I didn't do that. In high school, my girlfriend's girlfriends were a diverse lot. One of them liked reggae and weed. I was curious about that. After we graduated high school, the girlfriend and I broke up. She had become a fake blonde. The angst in me wanted something more interesting, something cooler than I was. I found a corrupted Californian who loved cannabis. She had tattoos and an unusual personality. This was the beginning of the story in which I'm about to tell. The girl seemed to sometimes know unknowable things. I came to the conclusion that she had a touch of magic or enlightenment. She may have just been arrogant or a mixture of those traits. I might sound arrogant these days after learning what I had learned. It was finally my chance to experiment with some pot. Once early on, I had sleep paralysis for the first time. When I was lying there with my eyes closed, unable to move, I saw a black shadow in the corner of the ceiling. It gave me the feeling of death, and I woke up some time later, crying. The girlfriend had no idea what had happened, but her father had cancer. He would die soon thereafter. Before her father died, I had the chance to try magic mushrooms with her. They were good. I seemed to leave my body, and I became one with the great green ocean. This seemed like an all-encompassing oneness. I considered it to be God. I then saw myself outside of my body. As I came back to Earth, I saw my girlfriend, but she was different. In just a few moments, I saw the layers of creation take effect on her. She turned from stone to covered in scales and feathers before she returned to normal. The walls were breathing. Everything glowed. My girlfriend was high as hell. So for the rest of the evening, we rejoined the group and smoked pot. But the feeling of leaving my body and seeing God had disturbed me deeply. I felt as if nothing in the ordinary world was real. This sent me on a deep journey. Once when my girlfriend was at work, I chose to eat mushrooms again, but this time, alone. I was overcome with the strong feeling that I didn't exist. I told myself, there's a ghost in the machine, meaning like the ego within was somehow detached from current events. I chose to read a lot about Eastern philosophy. I looked more into non-duality, believing that becoming one with everything would solve my crisis. I tried LSD a few times, ecstasy, and other drugs to see what would happen. I was what you would call a psychonaut. I wanted to explore the psyche. Then, the girl's father passed away, and she dumped me. My journey didn't stop. Although I'm sure it became a journey of distractions, I was poor, living in a collective living situation. A bunch of hippie punks around me were always doing various drugs. Sometimes it seemed like I didn't have a mind of my own, but we all exist on a network of consciousness. I seemed to be one of the only people really searching for something. One or two of my roommates were disillusioned and believing in nothing. I wondered if my prayers to God were just figments of my imagination, but I would go on my own journeys. Once I was hiking in the woods at dawn. I had eaten a healthy dose of mushrooms, and I was coming up, when the green man of the woods appeared to me. I wasn't the type to see things when I did psychedelics, but he was a masculine nature spirit, whose face popped out from behind various trees. He smiled, such a smile that it filled me with absolute joy. I took away from that experience that joy was a product of the mind. Another time, I took mushrooms alone in the graveyard, and I saw the way the wind blew with magical colors, and considered the oneness of God's breath. Another time, I was trying to open my third eye, when it seemed to me that each leaf on the tree had its own consciousness, and were all eyes of a sort, looking inwardly with me. Once I saw sacred geometry. It made the leaves of the trees appear like stained glass windows. Another time, I saw Indra's net, which is a Buddhist metaphor that describes an incomprehensible net of jewels which interconnect everything. I was dancing around a pattern that I had made in the sand, and I began to feel as though I had lived many lives. Indra's net stretched across a large river and up into the sky infinitely. I was reading a lot in that time. I had read dozens of books. I wasn't reading for my health. I was looking for the answer. There was some Zen, some shamanism, and some yoga. I had taken dozens and dozens of yoga classes. Some books I had read multiple times if I felt there was some type of spiritual clue in them. All of this work was cracking me up. My everyday life, as you can imagine, wasn't very stable. This would come up after my big awakening. The big awakening was as follows. A strange older man had moved into our punk house. His name was Jim. He seemed to have a touch of enlightenment or magic about him. He would sometimes tell me funny clues about the nature of reality. He seemed to emphasize that there was no such thing as the ego. One evening, all of us hippie punks were sitting around our crappy kitchen, smoking pot and cigarettes. No mushrooms or hallucinogens were involved in any way. My eyes kept making contact with Jim. I was worked up inside, trying to crack the code of the universe as usual, but my thoughts would be interrupted as if Jim was reading my mind. It was distracting. Eventually, I was next to him, and he tapped me on the forehead. Immediately, I feel out of my body. He and I were one spherical orb of consciousness, and yet somehow we remained ourselves. He told me that I was the force that makes the grass grow, and various other axioms from different times and cultures. He wanted me to look at my body, to see that I wasn't that body. I could see myself on my roommate's laptop camera, but somehow I couldn't bring myself to look at my body from outside directly. Time was passing as this took place. Eventually, it was the early hours, and I was back into my body. I was raw with emotion. Jim went about his business, presumably to sleep. I felt that enlightenment came through the experience of the body, not the experience of the mind. This was the way to presence. As I went to sleep that morning, a voice told me to not get caught in the dream. This scared me straight. I stopped searching for the ultimate truth. I had felt that I had experienced it and couldn't handle it, but I didn't stop smoking pot entirely. Now I felt my focus was having out-of-body experiences. I changed my reading genre to this. I became a lucid dreamer, but the universe had more to teach me about the evils of fooling around. Thrice, I looked into the mirror and saw the devil. The devil was me. I believe these were stress-induced experiences. Years had passed, and I tried mushrooms again. I turned up the heat in my small studio apartment to try and match my body temperature to create a sensation of nothingness. I laid on my back in a pentacle, with my arms and legs flat on the ground, spread out. A yoga bolster was under my lower back. I began focusing on my forehead, and then I made an upward-facing triangle with my hands. I was trying to astral project, but somehow this came to represent the symbol of the Illuminati. As I closed my eyes, I had a vivid vision. I was laying on an operating table, and everything was crimson red. 6 hooded figures stood beside the table, 3 on each side. They opened up my stomach and pulled out the organs, but I just observed. They were showing me that we survived the death of the body. Then the devil came. It was like the eye of Sauron, like from Lord of the Rings. It was a reptilian eye engulfed in flames, looking into my soul. I was trying to be brave, and I looked back at him, but his gaze was sucking me in. It was as if looking into the abyss, The abyss looks into you. Before I got too sucked in, my pet ferrets came romping by, and with them, I slid away into the glass dimension, a one-dimensional plane on which they played. As I got up, I tried to shake the experience off. I looked outside with great concern at the street below. Crackheads and linear streets gave me the impression that the Illuminati was creating the type of satanic order that suited them just fine. My path shifted then on to just trying to be a Christian. I haven't had mushrooms since, but I still lucid dream from time to time. At this time, I have enough psychedelic lessons to digest for years to come. Maybe I should try to astral project some more, but sober and with a lot of prayer. So thank you to August for sending that in. I hope I could do your story justice. And in a different video, I'll talk about a weird experience that I had that may or may not relate to this, but it was really weird and has a lot of odd things in it. So I'll save that for a different video. For this one, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. And if you did, then please like and subscribe. If there's a certain topic you'd like me to talk about on the podcast or anything like that, feel free to leave it down below. And if you'd like to donate to the channel, there's a PayPal and a Patreon in the description below, as well as super thanks here on YouTube. And with that, I will see you on Sunday for a video about the state of Virginia. So, with that, thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching. See you Sunday.